Hello, everyone, and welcome to Breakthroughs with Bree. On this podcast, we are discussing all of the topics that help us have breakthroughs on our personal and spiritual development journeys. My name is Bree, otherwise known as Healing with Bree, and I'm a channeler, energy healer, tarot reader, astrologer, and soul alignment coach. My mission in my work and in this podcast is to help teach people how to shift their consciousness, how to heal, and how to release beliefs and patterns and fears of their ego mind so that they can step into alignment with their soul to live lives of abundance, purpose, and bliss. In these episodes, I will be sharing either through my own lens and my own channel or through the experiences of my guest, wisdom and expertise about healing, spirituality, psychology, personal growth, holistic wellness, mysticism, consciousness, and so much more. My hope is that these conversations help you feel seen and provide support and inspiration for you with your own personal breakthroughs. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Breakthroughs with Bree. Today's episode is a little off the cuff. I don't really have much of a plan for it, other than it's about when we resist something, how we actually are energizing it to persist in our experience. So that'll be the name of this. What resists, persists. And really, what this episode is doing is it's teaching you how to get what you want. Because a lot of times when we get into that energy of resistance, it's our ego's way of trying to help us get what we want. So it can be a soul level desire of, a healthy relationship or, literally anything. And the way that our ego comes in, if we unknowingly kind of tap into that ego strategy of going about getting the soul desire, is that it identifies what feels like would be like the opposite of us getting that, or it views what we want as being contingent on some sort of external circumstance. So it resists any circumstance other than the one that we've decided is how we get the feeling that we want. And through that judgment of everything else is bad or not desirable or us not getting what we want or whatever that story is that we're telling us, we create this like opposition and like, I won't let that happen. I don't want that to happen. Anything but that, which is in itself a fear energy. We're afraid of it happening, which on the flip side can also mean we're afraid of not getting what we want. It's a very interesting kind of thing to consider, and I'm going to untangle that a little bit today, I think. And I say I think because I've really only come into this with the inspiration, and I'm letting source, spirit, my higher self move through me however it wants to support you guys in the best way. But it does feel like understanding why we get into resistance about things sometimes will help us see what's really going on there and put it down and find an alternative way of moving towards things that we want, of creating experiences and therefore external circumstances that reflect what we want. And I feel like we all have the power to do that. We all have the power to create our experiences in crazy, wild, and magical ways. And we don't have to be in an experience of resistance. We don't have to be in an experience of pain, of suffering, of being like at war with things, And so I just want to break that down and talk about that a little bit with you today. I have a really fun announcement. I am doing a free workshop on Saturday, July 20th at 10 a.m. Pacific that is all about self-worth. It's going to be called the Know Your Worth Workshop. And in this workshop, we're going to be deconstructing ideas and concepts around self-worth, us thinking that our self-worth is contingent on what we do. If we have a little bit of productivity addiction, if we think that the results that we get are what make us good enough for things, or even that our worth is based on our goodness and our acts of goodness to other people, which creates a fear of doing anything wrong. All of this can signal that we have our self-worth tied to things that it shouldn't be tied to. In this workshop, we're going to be deconstructing the 3D self-worth concepts, the things that have told us that our self-worth is defined by very human sort of ways. We're going to deconstruct this in a really cool way. It's all information I got through channeling with the Akashic records, and it is powerful. And we're going to be activating true soul deep confidence. Not only are we going to break apart why we struggled with self-worth before, but we're going to rebuild that up with the truth as it is according to our souls. And I'm doing this workshop all for free because this information is something that can help activate unshakable confidence in you. The kind of confidence that even when things go wrong, you don't start to question your own self or if it was your worth. When you desire things, the first thought isn't, oh my gosh, am I good enough for that? That's the kind of confidence that this kind of information can offer you. And I'm so excited to bring it to you in this workshop. So check out the description of this episode on my link tree. There's going to be registration for it. I highly recommend you attending it live because there will be some interactive portions, but I am going to offer people who register for the event to be able to access the recording a few days after the event. Eventually, this will be a digital product that is for sale. So I really encourage you experiencing it live and for free while that is available. Remember, Saturday, July 20th, Know Your Worth workshop with me, Healing with Bree. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'm excited to see you there. All right, let's talk about resistance. Let's talk about some examples, because the inspiration of this episode is actually an Akashic Channeling session that I did today with a lovely girl. Gosh, love her so much, who had a question in the session that the Akashic record keepers and the guides really helped illuminate all of the stuff that was around it. And it was one of these situations of desiring something, but going about it in such a way where really the intention was avoiding something we don't want. And that can be a really sneaky thing that happens, is that, our soul gives us the vision, or, it's a natural inclination or desire that we would have. And then the ego comes in so quick. And then all of a sudden that's distorted into an intention of, let me prevent the bad thing. And that's the intention, that we make actions, that we make choices, that we emit from ourselves, because that's the energy we are being in. Okay. So I feel like sharing this example to start off with. So lovely girl, she described how her father is not in great health right now. And she's been on a healing journey, and she has been able to observe that, some of his tendencies are holding on to a lot of anger and a lot of things in his early life and other sort of holistic aspects that may be contributing to the physical manifestation of this disease, which it probably is, and how she just really has this desire for him to get well and for him to heal and for him to let go of all of that anger and for him to get better and to not die, essentially. And her question was, will I be successful in helping him heal and let go of this stuff, ideally before he passes? And by the way, I love it when you guys come in and are so authentic and honest about what your questions are. I don't want anybody, even in coaching sessions, and I tell them this, I don't want you to ever change the question you really want to ask to put it in language that you think is the right language. And here's why. Because when you say it how you really want to say it, the words that you automatically choose reveal so much about what's going on and therefore give you the answer. So being really honest, even when that honest answer is one of those ones that other people might label as negative, I fucking love. I fucking love it. I love it when we're so vulnerable and I love it. Okay. So the interesting thing about her question though was what they said and what it reveals is that her goal is ultimately to prevent him from getting more sick and from dying. Right? And essentially what they said is two things can be true at the same time. One, of course, we have a desire for our loved ones to be healthy and happy and for them to stay here with us as long as possible so that we can be connected with them. Of course we have that desire, right? But for it to turn into, please don't let this circumstance happen to them, is when we can sort of get flagged that our ego has stepped into the picture. Another thing that they described in this is that sometimes in our human way of looking at things, we judge certain experiences that people could go through as bad and not being overall positive for them. And this is something I'm really grateful to have seen in my experience working the Akashic Records, but there is so much purpose in every single kind of experience that we could have, even the ones that feel really painful and really difficult. There is still purpose. You just never know the contracts that people's souls made, their higher selves made before coming into this life. I want to be clear. I don't believe that that's abuse, another person making the choice to abuse you. I don't know that I'm on that train about it, but what I mean is more if you have a random illness or something, right? Do I think that we have the opportunity and paths to sense some of these things and maybe not have that kind of experience, but instead work through the emotional stuff about it? Sure, I do. But I think that our souls understand that it's more likely that if we haven't really had the opportunity to work through things on an emotional level before, that it's probably going to manifest as a physical health thing, and that there is a certain lesson and certain purpose that happens when as a soul we can come on the earth and experience that kind of thing. And I think that that's really nuanced for everybody. And I don't want to make generalizations, but they explain this to introduce this concept that like what we judge as bad isn't always like ultimately bad. And this is important to understand because if, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at a family member, like who am I to say that it's not a part of that family member's karma and their contract and their soul lessons to see this through what really happens when they don't address the root of their issues that's causing the disease and they pass from it. Like who am I to say that's not a part of their journey? Who am I to say that that's not the most positive thing that could happen for their soul growth? Like, who am I to say that? It's my ego that says that can only be bad, that closes me off from the perspective that my soul has, is that there could be so much more going on for people, and our insistence to like judge things in such a binary way, like really blocks us from being able to interact with it a little bit more freely, with a little bit more peace and a little bit more love. So they explained that a little bit for her in response to this question. And ultimately, what they then said was, look, no, you're not going to be successful in your pursuit of preventing him from getting more sick and insisting that he heals and having this happen before he dies. No, with the current intention you have and the trajectory that's creating for you, like that, no, it's not going to be successful, just like plain and no, right? And then they said, I want to offer to you a different way to look at this and approach this that could still help feel like you're moving towards that initial desire that you had in your heart and your soul. So the first thing that they said, and what inspired this episode, is that it's your resistance to that outcome that is perpetuating a lot of this pain and struggle about this idea for the whole thing. And so the first thing that we want to recommend is that if you want to create change in how you're experiencing this, you need to look at yourself and how you are relating to this experience, right? Part of that is like, maybe this isn't all bad. Maybe I don't have to have this like existential fear for my dad. Maybe on some level, if like what I say is the worst case scenario happened, it could be okay. Like, I can like breathe that out. And then the other part of it too is that like recognizing, if we're really honest with ourselves, part of why that circumstance seemed so hard was because how hard it would be for me to have to experience them going through that. Like it would be painful for me to like watch a loved one go through like really bad health issues, feel the physical, emotional pain and all of the fallout from that. And on some level sensing that this is because emotional issues that they're just not open to addressing. And that if they did, it would probably provide them relief. Like being able to see that that's something that could help them, but not really being able to change anything and just like watching their health deteriorate and, potentially that would be so difficult, especially from the ego perspective. Like when we're living in that energy, like that would be so hard to tolerate those feelings in the body. And ultimately, when our ego's in charge, like that is what the ego's wanting to avoid, is my painful feelings, my despair, my grief, that the external situation is triggering in me. So what they recommended was to do some inner reflection about why she would feel resistance to experiencing that. And for her to, again, ask her higher self, ask her soul self for an alternative way to look at and perceive and relate to the experience. Can it be okay if that happens to me? Can I still feel safe within myself if that happens? And can my soul help me see the perspective about how that not only is safe, but maybe it could even be positive in some way for everybody? Because our soul has that level of perspective and wisdom for us if we're open to it, if we're really open to it and we desire it, because that's where deep peace is. Moving through really difficult times, really difficult circumstances. Like our soul has the wisdom to move through any of those with actual embodied and authentic peace. And it's not going to be by ignoring the pain at the thought of it or the fear of it. It's going to be receiving that pain, feeling, acknowledging the beliefs underneath it, the judgments we've made about the situation. It's like being intimately connected to those, but not for the sake of being in it, but for the sake of understanding it, being curious about it, not repressing it, letting letting it move, letting it breathe, and then being in that soul energy or stepping back into it and asking, okay, how else can I relate to this? Because this doesn't feel like it's the truth. If it's painful, it's not the truth. It's just not. How can it be more true and aligned to my soul? Like, how can I have peace with this, right? And see what comes up, see how you can look at it. Then what they said to her in this session was, after you've come to a place where you feel surrender, and you feel acceptance, and you feel peace, you're not going to feel as compelled, like almost compulsively, to feel like you have to fix this situation for him. You have to fix him so you can fix his health so he won't leave, or fix him or fix his health so he won't be suffering from something that could be avoidable, right? And that fixing energy is also an ego energy, by the way. It's an ego strategy for trying to get something we want. So when you do that inner work to access, even if it's like 2% more surrender, 2% more peace, like just keep coming back to it, opening the door a little bit more to receive that, and it'll start to move. It'll start to transform. It'll be inevitable at that point. So once she felt more openness, more surrender, more peace, with even the worst case scenarios, that's not making those scenarios more likely. That is a lie of the ego, that somehow us receiving the fear and letting that feel okay inside of our own selves with our own feelings. That's the only place that it's happening, is like inside of us, which is the only place it's ever happening, by the way, but that's a whole nother episode. It's like letting it be okay inside of us, letting us receive the possibility that bad things can happen and letting it be safe, letting it be felt as safe in our own body does not increase the chances of it happening externally. In fact, it decreases it, because the way that this universe works is the shit that we don't address inside of us, that we don't make peace with inside of us, shows up in our external reality because we didn't do it inside, and so that we can have an opportunity to make peace with it outside of us. So actually, it's opposite from what the ego is conditioned to think. So if we can make peace with those worst case scenarios and acceptance, what happens, according to what they brought through in this Akashic Records reading, is that we open up and we expand. It's like our channel almost dilates, right? Because we're not in a state of fear. These states of fear restrict, they contract us, right? And her intention, what felt like underneath the question that she asked, which again, I'm so grateful she asked exactly the question that she did, but the intention that felt underneath that was that she wants to bring love. If there's a possibility for her to bring healing or peace or whatever is meant for her to bring in that situation, whatever her soul wants to bring to this, like how can she do that? That felt like part of the soul intention under all of that. So what they said is, what's beautiful about all of this is that when you have surrendered, you become more open to be a vessel for our healing light of the universe, of God, of spirit, to move through you and into the environment around you. Great. The miraculous healing energy of the universe, of life force energy of God can move through me greater when I'm not so freaked out about stuff happening. Like, awesome. Great. Right? And what they said is that, like, when you can just be at peace with however it's going to unfold, knowing that God is, his hands on everything, right? Spirit is helping everything move in the best way that it possibly can. You just become open to let us move through you for how we can work in that moment. You become another place, like another touchstone, where that healing God energy can come into the situation, right? We're already all over it. We're already influencing him and his health and his body and all the people we can get to, but you create another place where we can move through into the situation when you are open, when you are in acceptance, and when you are in surrender and peace. And then the question that I love asking myself all the time is, how does Source want to move through me right now? How does Spirit want to flow through me? How does my soul want to flow through me? And why I like the phrasing flow through me is because that implies that when I have to receive it in the first place, I have to be open to it, let it like come into me, my field, my body, my consciousness. And flow through me means that if there's some place that's trying to guide me, that I can also let it flow and honor that inspiration and follow through. So for example, like let's just say, you know, this woman does this work. She feels and is able to get to a place of surrender, even though I'm sure it'll be very hard because it's her parent and, you know, she wants, but she's able to do that. And she comes to a place where she says, okay, Source, how do you want to move through me right now? Maybe in this energy, like literally her emitting the frequency of openness and surrender and peace and love, she's moved to just go hang out with her dad for an afternoon. And her field, being the electromagnetic powerful force that it is literally emitting into the space the frequencies, the healing frequencies of love, of compassion, of openness, of acceptance. That affects everything around you. It affects your cells in your body, but it affects the whole space that you're in. So maybe the energy of her field starts to subtly influence his field without her even trying to preach or talk about it. Like her just being in that energy, being in that presence, that will have a greater effect than you trying to talk at people every day of the week, Okay? Maybe what the guides know, what Source knows, is that what he really needs is to actually be open and accept the state of his health. Just accept it. Maybe that's where he needs to start to be open to do some of the other things that he needs to or that he could do while he's still on this earth, whether that's a little amount of time or a long amount of time, right? And maybe her coming to this reading to me and getting me interpreting that message as her like learning how to be open is all orchestrating so that she can be in the energy that will be not only best for her and her body and her health and her path, but also give the chance for him to finally feel that openness that he needs, right? But if her ego was always so stuck that it had to look a certain way and that it had to prevent some sort of bad option, she's not really plugged into her soul place. She's not letting Source like inspire her in any given moment about how she can be of greatest service. Maybe another way that she's of service is that she doesn't go over for a weekend that she might. Like she just has a feeling that she needs to stay in her own space. Who knows what happens in his world that again could be a part of his path of letting the most positive outcomes for him on a soul level happen? Like who knows? But when we let our ego be processed and detached from things, we actually become more open for Source moving through us in a way that will actually bring to light like more positive experiences for us, because one, we're not like at war and fighting against what's happening and in pain all the time. Like we can genuinely feel peace about what's happening, but then we become a wider vessel, a more impactful vessel for the kind of energy on an energetic level, on a frequency level, as well as the potential for action that can actually have more ripple effects for good than us being in that grippy, controlling, fearful ego energy. The possibilities are so much greater and so much more divine and like according to that intelligent plan we could never really comprehend when we allow ourselves to come back to like, how does Source, how does my soul, how does God want to flow through me right now? And listening to that and doing that personal work so that if there's a divine action, we can follow it. Or if there's some stuff we got to move through and alchemize, that we can do that. Those are, I tend to find what comes from that place is usually in one of those buckets. And like our work, our adventure is learning how to be able to do both of those and experience more of what we really are, which is incredible, incredibly powerful creators of our reality and like conduits, representatives of God energy like on this planet, which is just so spectacular. And I will say, if you are somebody that is really feeling moved and motivated about wanting to learn how to let that light of your soul, that energy of your soul really move through you in your life as open and as big and as fully as possible, and you're wanting to learn how to do that, both how to tap into it and how to pick up its signals, as well as learning how to release the energies that inevitably come up that feel like they kind of block us from following that inspiration, from following that flow of our soul. It can be perfectionism, it can be people pleasing, it can be anxiety, fear of being judged, fear of success, fear of failure, fear of abandonment, like all of it, right? All of those things come up and we just haven't learned a way to move through those and release those and let those experiences of alchemizing those empower us to be able to bring through our soul even more. If you want to learn that process, that's what I'm doing in my one-on-one coaching program, Soul Powered. That's what I love teaching people how to do. I have online modules that are like self-paced for you to be able to go through and learn some of the content so that we can use the session times to help you move through whatever uniquely are the things for you, help you get the breakthroughs. I'm channeling in those sessions. I'm doing energy healing in those sessions, as well as like coaching and teaching you that process of what I just described. I have a few more spots for that program opened, and I still have a discount until the end of July for anybody that wants to sign up for that. So I highly encourage you checking out healingwithbree.net if you want to learn more about the program. The next step would be scheduling a clarity call, because I really want to make sure that what you desire out of the program is in alignment with what it was created for, and therefore something that the program could actually help you with. So anyway, check out healingwithbree.net. Send me a message if you have questions, schedule a clarity call. It really does feel like there's a few more people who want to learn how to do that, because the vision of what it means when they're letting their soul energy move through them more freely, empower their lives, is so important to them, whether that's a career and a service they want to provide, or maybe it's how they're showing up in relationships and with their family and their kids. Maybe it's a combination of both things, or maybe it's something unique to you. But whatever that vision is that's really pulling you, like you are so capable of bringing that to life life. You're meant for it. It's meant for you. And sometimes we just need a little support on like working through our ish to be able to really let that come to light. So if this program is something that is interesting you, it might be one of those options that is available to support you to getting that. And I would love so much to help you do that. I'm feeling called to share a personal example on this, and I want to do my best to respect the privacy of the people involved. So I'll just say that if anybody is listening to this that like knows me personally or like my family and all that kind of stuff, that you maybe like pretend you don't or something, or like just, you know, like honor their own privacy. I want to share this story like for the benefit of other people because it just feels like that's how Spirit wants to move through me right now. So speaking of examples of when we gotta surrender our resistance sometimes and how that can show up in really sneaky ways. I had a family member who was really, really struggling with their health. They were developing some really, really severe health symptoms, specifically cognitive symptoms. So they were having like brain deterioration and were experiencing tremors, and a medication that they were taking for that was making them like fall, you know, at night when they would get up and they would injure themselves, and they were not able to drive, and then they would have nausea and not be able to keep down food. And there just like was a whole litany of really scary health symptoms that were manifesting. And this person is still like relatively young and, you know, had been doing what they felt like was good to make them healthy, and objectively on some level were having some really scary stuff happen. Interestingly enough, they were also struggling with addiction, specifically alcohol addiction. And that was like a part of all of this. And I happen to know as well, kind of similar to this client of mine that came through in an Akashic session, that they had a lot of early life trauma that they had done some processing of as far as I knew. But I mean, you can tell, and I knew that there was still a lot that they had not. And it had created a lot of patterns of avoidance and secrecy and repression that I felt like was making them sick. What I could observe like was a big part of what was making them sick. And there were just like a lot of other dynamics into it that were really sad and unfortunate. And the whole situation was very scary to me and very painful to watch. And for a long time, my part in this dynamic was to try and like step in and help like as much as I could. You know, I was trying not to be in as much of like a fixer energy as I may have been, you know, 5-10 years ago, but I was still very much in like I gotta take every phone call and help pick up the pieces and avoid all the tragedies. And did you think of this? Did you think of that? Like there was still a lot of that in me as I was relating to the situation. And the nature of my relationship with the person who was sick and the people involved was that like we had a very close relationship, and I feel like there was probably like a lot of emotional dependence. So I also felt like the state of like obligation, like I really care about these people, I love them so much, and like I want to be there for them, I want to support them. I can tell that they like really rely on me for a lot, even if I can kind of sense that it's not like super healthy. Like I would never want to make this worse. Like I have a feeling if I stepped away from this, like it would make it spiral. And like, what if the mental health stuff, you know, got to such a place where people were like suicidal, or they, you know, like bad things happened, or if, you know, health symptoms really deteriorated, and what if they, you know, just like all of the worst case scenarios. It felt very, very heavy and very scary. And it all culminated to a pretty like serious situation, especially on the mental health level. And the physical symptoms were exacerbated because of that for sure. And as a result of this like really building and peaking over months, my mental health was also really suffering. And I got to a point where it felt like I needed to take a step away from those relationships altogether. And that was a really hard decision to come to, but like on a soul level, just for me and my path, like that felt like what I needed to do at that time. And I'm not advocating that's what everybody does. It's just like, again, when I was following my own instincts, my own gut, that's what felt like I needed to do. And I was terrified. I had so much stress. I had so much like fears and guilts that became mine to work with once I made that decision to not be in contact with them for a while. I had so much guilt about how it was more emotionally distressing for them when they were already going through so much, when there was already so much going on. But again, I just had to trust my instincts that, and my soul, that it was going to be okay. And that when I honored what felt right for me on a soul level, that it really honored everybody involved. And I just had to hold hope for that. And that period lasted for a while. And when I got back together with them, something I feel really miraculous happened. And this is the part of the story that I really want to share with you, is that when I stepped away from what was really me inserting myself in the situation more than I needed to, kind of acting as like a crutch for all of the ways that maybe they couldn't take up that space in their own life, I was stepping in to compensate for it, kind of energetically, right? When I stepped out of that, when I stopped being sort of like an energetic crutch, you could say, what happened was, yes, things got worse at first. And from what I've heard, it was hard. But because it was finally able to get worse and get to the rock bottom, that's when there was the opportunity for change. And that person who had been really sick went to a facility to get help, both for their addiction and also working through some of that emotional trauma. And they did that work for a period of time. And they were actually able to, according to them, like talk about and process and feel through things that they hadn't before, and were able to meaningfully start being sober. And wouldn't you know that once the emotional root started to get released and an addiction that is literally a brain poison stopped, that the physical symptoms that were just getting worse and worse and worse all of a sudden dramatically decreased, dramatically, to almost not being present at all. Crazy. And I think that this is a really important example because our ego will tell us the story about the worst things that could happen to a person, right? And again, where I feel like the resistance comes from is really resistance to our own emotional experience if and as that thing happens. If we can be brave enough to start letting ourselves feel those feelings and to honor what our soul is telling us we need to do, we're actually honoring like God's plan for the whole thing. And in this circumstance, things improved. God's plan was that there was healing available, right? But it wasn't by me affecting it to happen. Like my ego was telling me that it should. It was by me following my heart and my soul about what was best for the circumstance. And frankly, my heart and my intuition had been telling me for quite some time that I needed to find a way to like eject myself from that place and that dynamic that I was in. I just didn't know how. And really it felt like my kind of like last resort was like taking a step away in a really big way. But so much more is possible for people when you give them the full space and the full dignity of their path. And this pattern of fixing or people pleasing or controlling other people, like that is a self-serving ego pattern. It's not really helping other people. That is a lie. That it's helping people the way that you think it's helping them. On an egoic level, a 3D level, it's helping them because it's helping maybe prevent them from getting to their rock bottom. But who's to say that their rock bottom isn't what people need? That that's not a part of their path, that that's not something that their soul signed up for and wants and needs, because on the other side of that is their healing. Can you tolerate letting that happen? Can you tolerate making peace with anything that happens so that you can actually be a vessel for love and for light and for your soul, whatever that looks like? Some people might have said that like being a vessel for love and life wasn't stepping away and being no contact with people. Some people might have said that, but my soul knew. And I just had to be brave enough and learn how to support myself and have the tools to like hold that, even when there was crippling grief and there was crippling guilt and anxiety and all this kinds of things. Like, could I learn how to receive my fear about what would happen? The very fear that was driving me into people pleasing, into fixing, into controlling, which is a form of resistance. Could I be brave enough to receive those, to process those, and to honor whatever my soul action felt like it needed to be, and trust? And in that circumstance, something really beautiful happened. Like, I don't know that there ever really would have been healing, or it might have been a long time or more physical deterioration that would have happened before that ever got to that point. But because I like got the fuck out of the way, like God could do his work. Like sometimes our ego is not only blocking us, but it's blocking other people too. And I think we just like, without shaming ourselves, without judging ourselves, we just got to be able to see that, right? Like I have so much compassion for that version of myself that desperately felt like the way to love people was to be the helper and the fixer. Gosh, I love her so much. She protected me and she did so much for me, that past version of myself. And I forgive her. I forgive her every day of the week for not doing differently when she didn't know how to do differently. Oh, I forgive her. I don't hold it against her at all. She was doing the best she could. I know that I was doing the best I could. And when I knew better, I did better. But when I didn't know better, I just did what I thought was best, and that's okay. And I hope you will allow that as well. And that perhaps if there are certain situations, and this episode feels like it's revolving around resistance, maybe with other people, and maybe there are situations that are causing us pain. But I hope that maybe listening to this gives you hope, or maybe opens the door a little bit for you to see, or for you to consider how our resistance to external circumstances isn't really helping get us what we want. And that if we are asking ourselves, how do we make that circumstance stop? How do we make that circumstance change? One, that's a signal that our ego, 3D human mind, has taken the wheel, and that maybe we could ask another question. How could Source, God, Spirit move through us in support of this situation? How can we be at peace and in surrender to any outcome? How can we feel safe about that? How can we make peace with it? And can we also be open to the truth, capital T truth, that whenever we want to change our experience with something, it's never going to be the external circumstance that needs to change. Never. It is always us that needs to change. Always, always us. I don't care what the circumstance is, even if you're in a circumstance with somebody who is acting very out of alignment with their soul and abusing. It's not them that needs to change your experience. It's you. It's you changing so that you can leave, so that you can take actions that are aligned with your soul, that keep you safe, that take you out of circumstances and places that don't treat you the way that you deserve to be treated. Now, does that mean that it's your fault? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But the power to change our circumstances and to feel experiences that are more peaceful, that are more abundant, that are more free, that are more loving, our ability to influence our own experience to feel those things lies within ourselves. And if we are fixated, and if what we think is we need to change an external circumstance, especially if we're thinking we need to change another person, that is wrong. It is false. It is a lie. It is a lie. It is a lie. It is a lie. And it is so important that if you want to step into this like divine creative energy, you just open up a little bit to hear that. The ego will tell you that's not true. She's lying. That can't apply to me. And that's just a form of your ego trying to prevent the change that will take you into unfamiliar places, because unfamiliar feels dangerous to the ego. And that's okay. It's okay. It's not them who needs to change. It is something in you. It's probably part your relationship to what it is, how you're judging it, your own emotional response to what they're doing, and also part your action of how you're choosing to interact with the situation. That is what I would recommend reflecting on if you have certain situations, external situations that you're really resisting and, looking for a way for you to find peace with, because you don't want this to persist anymore. You don't want the pain to persist. You don't want the war with it to persist. You don't want the tension. You don't want whatever that is to persist. We got to look within. The power is always, when we can bring it within us, we can change it. And it's so beautiful because, again, not only does our emotional experience with it immediately change, we feel more peace, we feel less stressed, we don't feel as judgmental, we don't feel as angry, whatever that is, our experience internally starts to change. But then because also our energetic electromagnetic field is changing, it is resonating at a different frequency, our external world starts to shift and change too. But by that point, we don't even need it to change, because the internal experience that we wanted the whole time, we've gained access to. And that's the magical way of manifesting and quantum physics and creating your reality and all that kind of stuff. But for now, I just offer you, what you resist persists. Your ego strategies are a form of resistance. It's doing the best it can. It's trying to protect you. It's not the enemy, but it's not the way to live a soul-aligned life. It's not the way to let the light of your soul shine through. And it's not the way to feel the joy and the abundance and the peace and love that your soul wants to feel. So I hope this episode helps you maybe observe and look at places where you have some resistance in a new way, that maybe it offers you an alternative strategy to start working through that experience, understanding that really it's yours. And again, it's not the external thing, that maybe you have it in you to change, and that will create the ripples, and your soul can guide you so intelligently, so infinitely, to such good things if we can just listen to it, if we can just let it flow through us and listen to it. Okay, I think that's all for today, even though it feels like there's so much more, but I can come back and do another one. The other thing I was thinking was even our physical health, our resistance to our physical health is part of what is making it persist. And that's why I love also Kim Durama's work. If you've not looked into her, I'll put her name in the show notes so you can look into it. But even us having forming a different relationship to our physical body and releasing some of the stories we have about that and releasing the resistance, and then we become open to our soul saying, so how can health move through me? How does the energy of health and of life force want to move through me right now? we start embodying that, like everything starts to change. So yeah, getting what you want is not by resisting and avoiding the bad situation. It's actually by making peace with all of it, setting the intention and letting your soul guide you towards how you can be in a presence or in an energy that will allow that will receive that, as well as its inspiration for how you can move through the world that also continues to magnify it towards you. So I love you all. I hope you have a wonderful week. Let me know if you have any cool ahas or like messages or thoughts about this episode. I love getting DMs from you guys. I get a lot of them on Instagram about how these episodes are impactful to you. So please continue to send those. Those are so special. I love hearing your stories. And I will see you next week. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode and for tuning in to Breakthroughs with Bree. Please share your favorite episodes with your friends and loved ones, and please like, subscribe, and rate the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it, as it helps me continue to create these episodes to help support your breakthroughs. I would love to stay connected with you, so please follow me on social media at Healing with Bree. Please check out my website at healingwithbree.net, which will always have the most up-to-date information about the services that I'm currently offering. And please consider using the link in the show descriptions to subscribe to my email list so you can be the first to hear about any offerings. You can get all of the free resources that I offer, as well as get my weekly channeled messages. My deepest love and gratitude to you, and I can't wait to have more breakthroughs with you next week.